And we are live. So, not legal advice, JR, and two special guests, William Ferrand and Ace in the Hole. By the way, Ace, I probably should have asked you. Do you have, is that your official name? Is that your legal name?
No, it's a nickname I got when I got my first job when I was 16, working at a movie theater, and I've kind of used it as a pseudonym in everything since then, whether it's video games or online, whatever. It just became kind of an official thing that followed me around. So I've been using it now for 23 years for various things.
That's great.
Wonderful. Do you mind if I call you Ace?
No, not at all. Many people do.
So tonight, and William is well known to the community, and it's a pleasure having you here. And of course, Little JR, and I promise not to call him Little JR, so I will not call him Little JR for the rest of the night, just between you and I. And just to be clear, most people are shocked when they find out how bad an electrician I am. Anyway.
There it is.
William, would you like, if you'd like, would you give us like a short blip as to how you got started on your YouTube channel and got involved?
I thought we were going to start with our barbershop quartet.
The quartet? As long as I'm the baritone.
It's not a long story. I was involved in Finger. I don't know. I have been involved in Finger for, I'm going to say 5 years. I could be wrong on that exact time. And then became involved in GTii. And at the time, Ham, who I think is the spark plug and the engine of the whole drive, and I know now it's taken on, there's so many people doing so much, but he's a little like that in that Star Trek movie Voyager.
Oh my god,
it's all collecting around him.
That's a callback right there.
We are really dating ourselves there, brother. That's Star Trek motion picture.
That's the original one right there.
Live long and prosper.
That's right.
Yeah, and so anyway, back then it was literally phone calls. We'd talk to each other. I'd call people. I'd tell the stories, and then Ham started having I don't know what to call them other than you call into a number, just traditional conference call numbers, and we would do that, and it started sporadically, and then it was sort of every afternoon. And I'd say there were 12 people listening at first, and then it expanded. But what I noticed, GTii went from, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 cents up to 4, came back down into 2, traded around, some people took profits, and then they crushed it again. And Ham was really isolated, I felt. He never asked for help. And I just felt he's so brave and he just keeps going. But it was tough. And so I said to myself, what can I do? And I started actually I bought this thing and I had no idea what I was doing. I had my camera and my phone, and I went out to the SEC, stood out there, did a video. And then I went to the law firm, did a video. Then I went somewhere else, did a video. And that didn't change anything. So I was sitting out on my, one evening, I was sitting out just debating what to do. And I signed into YouTube. I found out that I don't have enough something or other to just automatically do it. So I Googled a bunch of things and I signed up for Prism Live and watched a video on how to go live. And I said, okay, let's just test and see. And then I'll come back tomorrow and I'll do it. So I hit live and it started and people started coming in. I really did.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second. I see Matthew Parker, and I don't know to which stream he left it, but he left a sizable donation, it appears. So thank you, Matthew Parker. He says this will help with the cost of the truck. So
Is that what that was? I had no idea what that was.
yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, Matthew
That's
Parker,
a
he
good-
comes on some of my streams. He's awesome.
I'll just quickly say two quick things to finish. I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was going on too long. But one is I did it to support Ham. Secondly, I did it to make sure that people weren't FUD out of their positions. That was it.
And by
Right.
Ham,
So-
you meant, to those don't know who we're talking about, it's Ham the short killer. He's
Ham
kind
the
of
short killer.
he in our community, he's kind of the man when it comes to the naked shorts. So
He's on Twitter at Ham Short Killer. Yep.
okay, and I hope he paid you for that. How about you, Ace? I know you have a channel too.
Yeah, mine's actually much different. I came into GTii last October, funny enough, off a Lou vs. Wall Street video, because I was in AMC and I was like, felt so betrayed by Adam Aaron and all the nonsense going on in that stock. And, you know, it was like a slow death where you just kind of don't want to believe it. Because I was in over, a year and a half. And, but then the ape thing happened. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. This is insanity. And at that time, I felt I could trust Lou because he did call the ape thing correctly. He was the only one I saw.
He did.
And he was right. And once he was right on that, he brought up GTI about maybe a week or two later. And so I started looking into GTI and I said, you know what? This might actually be what I thought AMC was. And so I jumped over and then it ran to 9 the next week. And I was like, okay, this is fun. But I stayed with it, started listening to William, started listening to Ham, and got myself as educated as possible on it. And then at the end of December, I just thought, I've done media in the past, but it'd been a few years. And I was like, it's time to put up a YouTube channel and I'll just have some fun with it. Do some, I wanted to do like long-term life investing and business. I was going to talk about business and marketing and online stuff. And then I also was going to have like a segment every week or so where I talked about financial investments. So I talked about one video I did was on GTii and it blew up. It was the only video that really did much. And I was like, okay, I'll do a follow-up. And then I did a follow-up and it just did even better. And I was like, okay, I kind of was like, I see where the momentum is right now. And there's not many people talking about this. At that time, it was really William and maybe Lou every once in a while. And I was like, I think Lou had lost a lot of credit, even with me, over the whole COSM thing. And so I was like, well, there's a whole community out there. And I'm somebody who's done research on this. I can keep talking about it. And also I wanted to just kind of be an encouragement to the community, because I know how hard it is and I really believe in it. And I was like, if I really believe in it, I can communicate that and maybe just help others who, it's hard sometimes. It's hard. We have hard weeks, hard months, but I didn't want people to miss out on something that could be life-changing for them. And so that's the whole reason I just kept going, and it just got bigger and bigger, and it didn't became my main content. Every once in a while I'd talk about Finger or something else, but yeah, so that's really mine. It was kind of accidental, but it's worked out.
That's wonderful. And I was before I let Mini JR say whatever he's going to say, I wanted to say the reason why I had both of you guys on is because I respect the heck out of both of you. Mm-hmm. And it's, I think William is an incredible gentleman, and I watch him frequently, and I am so impressed with his style and knowledge, really. Mm-hmm. And Ace, the same thing, just the way you handle the people you interact with. And I know you have a background in organizing people in a way, or, speaking to people, and it comes through. And I really respect that, because I think the world needs more people that can communicate in a civil way. And I respect both of you for doing that. So
thank you.
Now I've flattered you enough. I'm going to rip you some later on. But,
can I just ask Ace what your media experience was?
Well, so funnily enough, the last 6 years I've done digital marketing. So, and I worked at an entertainment company for 2 of those years, did a lot of live videos, online marketing commercials, that sort of thing. And, but before that, I worked in ministry. And in ministry, I did public speaking, obviously from the pulpit sometimes. And I helped run church, their websites, blogs, that sort of thing, building videos for them. So, and then way before that, when I was a youngster, it's teenage years, my friends and I used to make videos together all the time. We were all, Californians, wanted to be Hollywood, so we had fun, did a lot of skit videos, that sort of thing. But I've been public speaking on and off since I was 15 years old.
Wow.
So, yeah, just a wild mishmash of background for me.
Well, it's respected and appreciated on this forum. And JR,
very
you
much
want to say anything? You have anything to add?
just that, I feel like a complete tool because I've not really watched any of your YouTube stuff, Ace. I have been in several spaces and heard you talk, so I know your stuff. William, I got onto your YouTube channels, William, because I was doing research in GTii. And I have to say, I enjoyed watching you so much. You became a staple of my work day. When I would sit down at my desk at my last job that was extremely stressful, you were kind of my release for the better part of 3 months until I ultimately left that job. And it's funny because when Richard first had me on, he asked me a question about who was my favorite YouTuber. And I jokingly said it was you because I had forgotten watching your videos, only because it's not that there was nothing memorable, but you were a very close for me during that time, William.
Yeah.
And I didn't even really care what you were talking about. Just listening to you helped me get through my days. But as you know, when we met in person, one of my pet peeves was you didn't know how to pronounce my name and you would screw it up every time.
Of course, when JR told me that William was his favorite YouTuber or whatever, I just didn't believe him. I just couldn't believe that was true. And I think he was lying. In my opinion, he was lying.
The other thing, too, is I don't even have a YouTube channel.
What's wrong with Weidner?
The last part is just to get this on the record, because Ace makes a big deal about this constantly. Ace is originally or spent a good amount of his time, as I understand it, in Northern California.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a hated Giant and 49er fan. And
exactly.
I did have to take, I drank some ginger ale before we went on just to cure my nausea, and I'm okay to go. As an original Ram and Dodger fan. Not an original. But
that's rough.
All right. So I wanted to kind of go into some substantive stuff.
Hurt our quarterbacks so they could win, but that's okay.
All right.
Yeah.
That's good enough. It counts. It counts if you win the Super Bowl, right?
Win's a win. Win's a win.
Yeah. Listen, when I grew up, by the way,
you ain't first, you're last, JR. If you ain't first, you're last.
I was a Ram fan in the 70s.
I got about 20 more of these things all over the basement.
The Rams had great teams in the 70s, but never won. So I'm entitled. So first thing I want to talk about is stock-wise, both of your opinion, and JR, about GTii and Finger and where you think they're going. And obviously it's not financial advice, not legal advice, not any advice. This is just for JR and I, two lawyers blabbing about nonsense. For the two honored guests, they might have some credibility, but still not financial advice. So go for it. Maybe Ace, you could start.
Yeah, I mean, William's going to have much better on the background and everything of these, and looking at it from. Yes, you will, William. You're so modest. But what I can give, I'll just give you the quick spiel of what I've seen. And that is that coming out of AMC, I learned about naked shorting and counterfeit shares in the market. Something I just had no idea was a thing, but I'm sure like most people watching this, we've learned so much more about what's going on in our institutions in the last 5 years than we ever believed possible. It's that joke now that conspiracy theory is just 6 months ahead of it being fact. And that's kind of what we're learning in the markets. And so what I've found in GTii and now Finger as well is just that after seeing what was in AMC and the counterfeit shares, and that got so huge, GTI is this little company, and it's a little company that shorts chose to go nasty on after paying off a debenture loan and trying to put them out of business, basically. And then the cool thing about GTI is it's so small that they have like no debt and no overhead. So good luck making them go bankrupt. And because of that, it's just kind of nonstop built up this run. And what we know of from Ham, who's somebody I greatly trust, is that it's basically about 400 million shorted shares now against a company that maybe the float is somewhere between 75, maybe 90 million at the top is what I've seen. I don't think we have the exact numbers, but basically it just makes it an incredible setup because on top of that, this company was outed. We found out their prime broker, and that prime broker was outed by the DTCC with actual proof in legal documents that came out last October, which is apparently just nobody's ever seen that happen before, as far as I know. So it's insanity. And by holding on and believing in this stock and this company, it's basically a setup to eventually have a big breakthrough where they're going to have to cover at some point. And meanwhile, it feels like the economy, what's going on with the prime broker Alpine, what's even going in with the buying pressure of shareholders finding out about it. Just from every single side, it looks like the shorts are running out of ways to keep it down. But honestly, I'll say the best part in all of this is that the company itself has shown a willingness to fight with perseverance and not screw over the shareholders. And that is coming out of AMC. That's a really big deal to me. So that's kind of my breakdown on GTI, the real short version of why I believe in this. And honestly, I've only been here 8 months or so now. There's others been here almost 3 years or more. And but I think there's a lot of people agreeing that it looks like we're starting to see light at the end of the tunnel. And a lot of that's because of Finger Motion. Now, Finger Motion, I don't know as much. I just know it's a strong company that's on the up and up. Similar story to GTI in that it paid off a debenture loan against toxic lenders, and also has a similar trapped situation where, and then in their case, it's about 155, 160 million short, naked short against it to a float of maybe 14, 15 million. So it's just an insane percentage, short interest percentage against it. And Finger actually is the one right now, which looks at the pressure is building and it could break any day. So that's the shorter version of it, but I'm sure there's some details that William can fill in. That would really be
I
helpful.
think you did a great job.
Oh,
yeah,
William,
you've been in Finger, you said, for quite some time. So, and the question kind of was directed at kind of future path of the stock. So, and again, not financial advice. You know, I should make that as a standing.
How many times do you have to say that?
I know.
I just say it once.
I know. That's a standing statement for this point forward.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you see it going forward from this point in time? And I know like timing is impossible, but how do you see it?
Well, you know, you have to give me the leeway, I guess, latitude. I'm not a lawyer, so I allow my mind to go make assumptions, which is not always what you can do in law. But
well, you can assume things in the law.
Not gonna. Everything has to be entered into evidence.
Don't you have like a family member who's in the law? So
my brother's a lawyer, my sister's a lawyer, and
you're virtually a lawyer.
Yeah, really.
Well, and I've had to fight cases, and I've been told by lawyers that I would have made a good lawyer, but I can't imagine the mind-numbingness it does to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Much appreciated.
Why the hell do you think we're here?
You know, it's for 40 years anyway, the market has been Goldilocks. And brokers, so to speak, they call them wealth managers now, wealth advisors. They make more money than any lawyer ever makes.
Oh yeah.
And for it to be a lawyer, you got to read all the time and write and stay up late at night. A broker just has to be glib. And anyway,
Sounds like a great job.
it is a great job. I recommend it highly. But the thing is, we're going now from a 40-year period of everything lined up perfectly to it's going to be tough, I think. But anyway, so I'll start on Finger without any comment on the company. I just found these about which one is the most. This one, I'm not going to go through in detail. I just started looking at the chart a little while ago, and then I did it again. There was a double bottom. See the double bottom and a channel. I'm not all like Arca or Avid. You're not gonna. But then this one, which got rained on, the
Was
stock
that crumbled? That looks like it was crumbled.
You know, JR knew a lot of women that had double bottoms. At least he said so
Yes.
last week.
And I've lived in. Yes. We'll leave it there. So it broke out, and then it pulled back. This was what, 2 Fridays ago? Perfectly normal. So then I think Ace saw this one. I did, in frustration, I did another chart just using 2-year. Doesn't matter. Charts are completely, this isn't facts. This is all BS. But anyway, it gives you, what charts try to do is determine the mood of the crowd. Where are people who bought and are weekends, and they're like, oh, I shouldn't have bought it, and where are they going to sell? Where are they going to get out? And then where is it going to break out? And the fear, that's all it is. It's psychology. But anyway, I drew this trend line here on the bottom, and then one trick I learned at Merrill Lynch, you can take that trend line and you could go up. I went all the way up here, but then I noticed before I came on just now, this trend line here, that's where it broke. That's where it pulled back. And I don't expect, so I'm going to answer your question. I don't expect this pullback to be very long. They're going to try to, they being the shorts and the criminals, and then a whole different segment of the market is the option traders. They're going to try, I think, to disappoint. I don't know if they watch us, but to me, all of these charts, it wasn't us. It wasn't us doing this buying. So I'm not concerned by talking out loud because it's not us buying. It's somebody else buying.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to try, the expiry date is Friday. So I think they're going to try to fight it and try to suck out all the premiums. But that doesn't have to be what happens. It can break through. So my own opinion, and not legal advice, I'm going to go way out on a limb. I was wrong on Djokovic, so I could be wrong on this. I think the stock, whether it's tomorrow or Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, it's going to break out to the upside. Normally, when you have a trend like that, it needs to test it 3 times. I don't see any selling. All the weekends are long gone.
Yeah.
They're just, this is just computers playing with Fibonacci this and 0.623 spot. And it works. Don't get me wrong. And I highly recommend listening to technicians, but I just don't think there's going to be any selling. So I think it's going to get to, I'm going to pick a number. I'll say 950 plus or minus 50 cents tomorrow, Tuesday or Wednesday. And then when it may kind of hesitate there, but it could easily break out and be at 15, 21, 33 and on its way. Now I'll just give you a little, look, this is Jeffries at the top. Most utilized prime brokers for under 50 million, 50 million to 100 million. Jeffries, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is ninth, and here it's eighth, and the next one is 100 to 250 million, and it's basically eighth or ninth here. Look at these names. Jeffries is not Alpine, Scottsdale. It's not these crappy posers. So I think the number on the short, which comes from I'm forgetting his name just now, Tom Runk at buyins.net. His service provides a detailed, which lawyers would love, where he tracks FINRA numbers, but then he has access to data from around the street. 157 million now. Anyway, 150 million shares that are underwater from that. When I started looking at this chart, it was $1.44 a month ago. So it's $500 million to 600 million, 700 million. Somebody's down a lot of money, and I don't think Jeffries is going to play around the way Alpine did with the Kramers on GTii.
Yeah, JR, you have anything to add?
I not really to finger. I've been watching it. I go on the spaces when I see it as tagged, just because it's interesting to hear it. I'm not invested in it, so I don't analyze it the way I do the stocks that I'm in. I'm in GTI. I've been in GTI for some time. In fact, I got into GTI before MMTLP. MMTLP took over because I had a larger position in MMTLP when I got in it. I took a larger position than I did in GTii, and GTii kind of went the wayside when I was in MMTLP. And then, fast forward to December, you guys know the story. I've, been preoccupied with MMTLP spaces, but I increased my position in GTii when it got to those levels. It was mind-boggling. So that kind of, and then with all the legal things that were going on, I got pulled into a space to answer questions on the whole Alpine thing, and spent an entire weekend reading over all the filings for GTii. And then, I sucked Richard into it because I needed some help, because it was overwhelming, to be honest with you. Once I started to dig through all those documents and the questions that I was getting, and I got pulled into two different GTI spaces, and the one space had over 600 people on it, and they're all, hammering me with questions. And that's when I sucked Richard in and was like, dude, you got to take a look at this as well too. And, here we are now, how many months later, and, we're knee deep in it. So that's really been my primary focus in GTI, has been the legal aspect.
I got two. I'll kind of take two also. So Finger, what I think is interesting is in my limited investment experience, I heard there's a 3-day rule. So oftentimes it takes the market 3 days to digest earnings, and Finger's earnings were Friday. And we don't know where the buying would come from, whether it would come from the United States or outside the United States. So perhaps when the earnings came out, it was after hours on Friday. And it might be Tuesday, Wednesday, might be Monday, but I think those earnings were good, solid. They reflected, big growth and future growth. So I think from a fundamental standpoint, I thought it was good, and I would expect it to influence the price. Whether, it goes this week, next week, thereafter. I know Ham believes that it's sooner than later, because that's his opinion. And again, I hopefully am not misquoting him, but I think his belief was, in terms of buying options, if you're going to buy options, you might as well buy them that are expiring now, because he thinks that things are going to happen sooner than later. But, we don't really know. In terms of GTI,
he's a Florida Sooner, isn't he?
Some disgusting tool like that. By the way, I'm a Bruin, a UCLA Bruin, so that's my. I'll take it.
I interrupted you. Sorry.
Well, that's okay. That's okay.
That's all right. I do it all the time, William. Don't worry about
it. In terms of GTii, I find that there's multiple potential catalysts. There's Trento, there's the water, there's other things. And I know that everybody kind of focused on Alpine. So this is where I was going to take JR a little bit on this. So Alpine, when I got originally involved, Alpine was going to go out of business. Basically, that was kind of like the theme.
Back in May. It was back in May.
I still think it's going to happen. But the last ruling, and this kind of relates to kind of what's happening. So the U.S. Supreme Court and some circuits are trying to limit the authority of agencies over the federal government. So they'd rather have a district court rule on something than an administrative agency. And conceptually, I have no problem with that as long as things are properly regulated. If it creates a vacuum and people get screwed, then that's no benefit in my mind. You know, for example, if Gensler's kicked out, but the SEC doesn't enforce regulations to protect retail, that's not a big move or an advantage. So I find Alpine interesting because they're, in my opinion, they're scumbags, you know, liars. They should be out of business. FINRA should be ashamed of themselves that after they issued a full cease and desist letter, that they let them kind of commit 35,000 violations. That's obscene.
They
really
won't let them do 36,000.
Yeah,
That's the line.
That's the line. That was it. They'd had enough at 35,000.
They drew the line.
35.
Bastards.
But I found that obscene that FINRA didn't act. Oh, you got it there. Okay. I really found it obscene that they didn't act. And so, but now what's happened is they've basically sued FINRA. In that process, they went to a district court to get an injunction to stop FINRA from kicking them out. The district court said, get out of here. They went up to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal said, we think you have a good argument. It wasn't just they granted the injunction. They said, we think that FINRA might not have authority to operate here. So that's pretty strong language. Now, that doesn't mean that FINRA couldn't go, and this is what I suggested, and I would urge everybody to call FINRA and make the suggestion. If they have to wait for the appellate court now to issue a final ruling, which they do, which will take like 6 months, let's say, FINRA could still go ahead and proceed in federal court and try to get Alpine kicked out. Nothing's stopping FINRA from doing that. So I think FINRA should be encouraged tomorrow to go into court and either put a receiver in or somebody to operate Alpine's business, to take over control over the books and records, and to stop the violations, which FINRA said they had 35,000 violations after a cease and desist order. I don't think there's any good reason that FINRA shouldn't do that. And really, to this point in time, I'm appalled they haven't. If anybody wants to add anything, feel free.
Yeah, I was just going to say the only thing that Richard and I can think of is the reason they're not going into district court is the cost. You know, they'd have to retry the whole case all over again. But if they're such a bad actor and they're doing some things that are so detrimental to the market, why would they not? Is that not what they're supposed to do to protect the market and protect investors? Yet they have this shitty prime broker out there that's violating a cease and desist order. They've already been expelled once. They were on route to get expelled twice. And, you know, here we are.
There's Ham is on a space call right now, which we could listen to or not. But I think Charlie Payne might be talking.
William, maybe if you want to listen to it, you go on mute and you want to listen to it and report back if you want to. If not, then please stay with us. Whatever your choice. I won't feel hurt either way. If you want to listen to the call and then come back, that's fine too.
All right, let's. We can continue.
Okay.
It doesn't look like Charlie Payne is here.
Okay. So there's a bunch of cases.
Co-hosting.
Okay. There's a bunch of cases that are headed to the Supreme Court. There was one that basically said that if you had an issue about whether the SEC had jurisdiction to operate over you, that you didn't have to go to the SEC. You could go to district court. There's another one about the appointment of the judges. So the judicial system within the SEC and FINRA. That's going up to the U.S. Supreme Court also. I think they're gonna bang FINRA and the SEC so that they're gonna limit or they're gonna broaden who's going to be the decision makers. So it's not always the capital markets making the decision. And ultimately, that might impact immunity issues, might impact arbitration. We've talked about this. You're kind of stuck, right? If you sue a broker because they screwed you, not going to say they intentionally did anything wrong, but let's say they made a big error, you lose money. They require you to go to arbitration. And apparently there's a report coming out of the Appropriations Committee that acknowledges that arbitration for the consumer is not beneficial. You get a lower award, and they don't assist you with collection. So a lot of times you can't collect the award. So I think all that, and so that takes me back to GTii. So I think the courts are moving in that direction where the SEC and FINRA will have to do a better job, and it'll be before the courts. And again, hopefully, FINRA will approach the court and go forward. And again, I encourage anybody out there to call FINRA Monday and make the suggestion.
Are you saying there's a movement beyond just these charlatans at Alpine challenging the constitutionality of FINRA's ability to enforce regulations?
Not just FINRA, SEC, and all governmental agencies.
So we've gone from having the SEC under FDR, regulates the Securities Act of 33 and 34. We've evolved to self-regulation, and now we're going to just not have any at all. We're just have to go to court.
Well, so a couple things. So, Richard and I, when we first started reviewing Alpine's lawsuit when they were still down in Tampa, we kind of concluded that it was nothing but a delay tactic. That they made all these filings and they were making this constitutional kitchen sink argument against FINRA for nothing more than to delay the inevitable. And then about 3 weeks ago, Richard, you found, here it comes, Jaworski. You found the Jaworski case. And lo and behold, if you read the Jaworski case and look at Alpine's argument, the arguments are very similar. So we suspect that the attorneys in Alpine, not plagiarize, but used the same arguments that the Jaworski case made to maybe do a double pronged attack at FINRA. And if you read the Jaworski case as well as the judge's decision or the 3-panel judge decision in the injunction that Alpine got ruled on their favor, the judges are basically saying the same thing, that there's a problem here with FINRA's, again, for lack of a better term, because we don't know what to call them at this point, but adjudicators that are making these determinations based on, what FINRA is finding in terms of enforcement actions. So we see this movement against FINRA by basically the parties that are supposed to be regulating, making the argument that they're not constitutional.
And on top of that, the secondary point or primary, depending on which case, is they claim that when Congress gave the agency the authority to act, so for example, gave the SEC authority to work to handle securities violations, that when they gave them that authority, they didn't give them any kind of criteria or guidance. And because of that, it makes it unconstitutional, because it's a grant of an executive branch power without properly specifying the terms of it. And on top of that, the issues of the court system, they all have their own court systems. The SEC has their court system, FINRA has their own court system, and through FINRA, the brokers have their own court system. That's why I think if the courts are successful in challenging the way that FINRA handles their court system, that might roll down to us as consumers when having to arbitrate disputes within a FINRA system. And I think that would be a huge benefit to consumers, because it would change the way brokers negotiated with retail investors. It would change how they thought of their potential exposure, because generally, if you go to court and you have the right to a jury trial, the possibilities are much greater than if you're in front of three guys who work at Merrill Lynch that have experience in the securities business. No disrespect to Merrill Lynch, by the way, William, but
there's usually women involved too. Hell of a price to pay for being stylish.
But that we see that as a big change. You know, one
sorry,
thing
not real quick. Ham, do you? I mean, William, do you need to go on Ham's call? Because I keep seeing comments for you.
I don't know. I promised to not that I would be here, and Ham put it on at 7.
Yeah, he did.
But
I asked Ham not to do that. So
okay,
I'll just stick to my commitment here, and
okay.
I'll just have to make it up to everybody else later.
Always a gentleman, but feel free if you really do. I'm there.
You're too kind. You're getting there's a lot of comments about when's Ham's call and blah blah. So
what a jerk!
We'll bring you back and grill you. Don't worry about it.
This line of talk is interesting because early on, I talked to some lawyers about these cases, and the problem is the arbitration clauses. So that's one whole side about basically emasculating, sorry to use a gender word, but taking away the muscle to go after big claims for retail. Anyway, that's a whole issue, but I'm really intrigued on this theory because I don't think the markets are regulated right now very well. It's this, and I blame, I hope without political aspersions, I blame Bill Clinton for maximizing this idea of that we don't need to do much because the markets will self-regulate. They'll never do anything that's not in the interest of the market. Well, I think it's, I think that's for a bright guy. I don't know where he came up with that idea, but
his wife might have had something to do with it. I don't know.
So we now have we have very little coverage, but I want to add another spin in it. When the 2008 crisis came, these massive firms that have said that they don't need to be self-regulated, don't need regulation. They can do it themselves. We don't need your help. We're free market. We're big boys and girls, and we do trading, and we're just, it's law of the jungle. Whoever wins, wins. Whoever loses, loses. Well, when they start losing, all of a sudden it's socialism. They come to the taxpayer. Well, one of the things they had to do, Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, I think it was maybe it was Morgan Stanley, had the first crack at all the books, which I think was unfair. But they split their operations into banks, and they sent the risk out. So they created prime brokers. And so all those risks they were taking inside on their trading desks with compliance officers, with regional managers, with oversight, it's all out in the Wild West. So you end up with guys like John Hurry and the rest breaking the law, but there's no compliance. Mm-hmm. There's a lawyer writes a letter. Well, we have reasonable belief that we're going to have the shares to cover the trades. That goes into the computer, and the computers hum. and no one ever notices a problem. And anyway,
Yeah, I think I have
I'll
a
stop
slightly
there.
different spin. I have a slightly different spin on that. I think it's Congress. So maybe somebody originated or exacerbated it, but Congress, I think a lot of the reason why Congress hasn't taken what I would say aggressive and assertive action is because if you opened up their drawer, they might be in trouble. They might have engaged in transactions that at least were unethical, at least, or could be
Questionable.
questioned. And I
Well,
don't think they.
I think that's right about their trading, but I think my guess is after a generation or more of Wall Street indoctrinating all of us that you have to put your money and manage money.
Mm-hmm.
Most of Congress has no clue what they're talking about. And Goldman Sachs and BlackRock are huge contributors. I would say a lot of it is they just have no clue. But I agree with you on the trading.
They educate Congress on what they want to educate them on. They're controlling the message. They're controlling the information flow that's going to these folks. They're the ones sitting down with them. And, you know, when a bunch of fancy lawyers and a bunch of fancy Wall Street guys walk into one of those offices, they can spin the story any way they want. And so now you have this false narrative out there that the market works exactly the way it should until it doesn't. You know, 2008 being the example. And, you know, this what we're all talking about, counterfeit shares, naked shorting, has yet to truly rear its ugly head in terms of the overall economic impact. That's coming. We know that. We all know that. It's coming at some point. And when it does, it's going to be just as bad, if not worse, than the 08 financial crisis. Because to your point, everybody screams about socialism until they're too big to fail and need money to continue their operations. Because at that point, too many of Main Street are going to lose money.
It's like in 2008, what Bush say is like we have to counteract capitalism to save it, or something stupid like that.
He also said this sucker is going down.
Yeah.
I think.
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I think if one solution I have, it's a constitutional problem, but I think it's a real big issue. Constitutional problem, no big deal.
No, it is a big deal.
I know. I was joking. Of course, it's a big deal. Of course, it's a big deal.
FINRA's constitutional authority is, and the SEC's constitutional authority is, if you read and Orogrande, OJ Orogrande, she told us how to pronounce it, and I read it, and I'm still going to screw it up. But if you read the Jarsky case, Richard's laughing because he knew what I was going to say. If you read the Jarsky case, the case talks about how, the lack of authority that was properly delegated by Congress. And so Congress could fix the issue by reauthorizing the authority under the Securities and Exchange Act. The problem they have now is the Republicans are in control of Congress and they're gunning for Gary Gensler's head. Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens if the Supreme Court takes up Jarsky and rules in favor of Jarsky and says, yeah, the constitutional authority wasn't properly delegated, and so they shouldn't have it. So they've got to find another means to go through with these enforcement actions, but throws it back at Congress. And, what's Congress going to do?
I can't believe this. It's the laws are there, and you're going to say, not you, but in general, they're going to say, we're not going to enforce Reg Show. We're not going to enforce the Securities Act of 33 and 34 because of this.
No, they won't.
Interesting debate.
They won't say it. They just won't do it. Yeah. They won't say they won't enforce it, just won't enforce it. I think the solution is different. I think that the problem is the congressional terms are 2 years. And that means that if you're running Congress, you're running for re-election day one of your term, and all you are doing is raising money for your election. Now, I'm exaggerating, of course, but I think if the terms were longer and the Congress people didn't have to always feel like they were running and were beholden to money, like immediately, that they would be more aggressive.
The other solution is like the UK, just make financing public, not private, and make it a 3-month election.
Right.
2 months.
No, I agree with that too. I think
There's other ways around it. I agree with that. I think that I think there's a reason it's the 2 years and the 6. I think they had good reasons for it, and I think it can work. What's happened is the corruption along the way, not the system itself. It's how the system's been circumvented. That's how I see it. I'm a pretty constitutionalist, founding fathers type guy. I love all that stuff. And what I think is, and I do think this is kind of a sidetrack because we're talking about changing how Congress works. We're going to be here another 50 years, 100 years. So, but as far as like this specific issue, I mean, if it goes Supreme Court, will we even hear about that before like next year? Because I mean,
which case? No, yeah, next year.
Yeah, it would be June, right, when they release a decision.
Is it October?
They start in October and it'll be released sometime in 2024.
Yeah, they release their decisions in June.
So everything would be on hold for that long?
No,
if it's Supreme Court, if it's a decision, Supreme Court usually. I mean, they could shoot it down and send it back during the term.
There's a variety of things they could do. Of things they could do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we were just kind of focusing on that as a particular issue.
Sure.
But I understand what you were saying, Ace. I understand, but ultimately the problem is money, right?
Yeah.
There's too much money in the system that is impacting politics, and it doesn't work. I don't think it works to our benefit.
Absolutely not. I mean, I totally agree with you. I see it a little different. I think money and power combined, it's the dual role, because not every rich person's bad, and not everybody in power is bad. I mean, usually if they're independently wealthy first, that's most of the time that they might be good. You know, they're not worrying about money. And honestly, I've heard one interesting, and I don't even know what you think about, but one interesting solution I heard was that you actually pay them more. You pay them, $500,000 a year, and then you cut off, you ban trading, you ban everything, donations, all that. And that way they're making a good salary, covers everything. Because what I think they make maybe 170 now, which seems like a lot. But I just watched a video today about how if you extrapolate the wages in the worst part of the Great Depression at $4,000 a year in today's dollars, that would be $94,000 a year. And that's what it takes just to get by paycheck to paycheck these days. That's insanity. And so, if you're a person in power, $170,000, it's not attracting the best people. I should put it that way. It's like if you're paying teachers $35,000 a year, you're not attracting the best people. You're attracting lazy asses who look forward to vacation for the summer and benefits and are just going to skate by. You're not attracting the best people to any job that doesn't have good wage structure. So I think that's just an interesting solution. I'm not saying I agree with it one way or the other. I can see pros and cons, but I don't think it's exactly just money. It's how they're getting their money, how it's not transparent, how it's allowed to be hidden. And there's a lot of things I could say that get us banned on YouTube right now if I want to go down that route too much, but so I won't. But the point is I don't know how fixing that right now anyways is going to get us off track of this decision, but or this conversation. But anyways, that's just kind of one thing I've heard that was interesting in that area.
That's my premise. And my premise is that Congress should be paid like CEOs, and that if they engage in any felonious conduct, the penalty should be 20 plus. Mm-hmm. That's the trade-off. Sure. We'll pay you well, but if you commit a felony, you go to the pokey.
I think Congress makes more money than most Americans, but I think it's more than just money. I think some of the corruption is I don't know what to call it, but I always say they want their daughters to go to the best schools. There's a pressure on go along, get along, or you're going to be blackballed.
Yeah,
that's true. I hope that doesn't have some bad meaning, but that's, you're going to be.
Well, it's better than black-faced, right?
I don't think it has any. I don't mean it in a bad way, but my point is, it's about their career, but it's also about their family. It's right. There's a leverage. I don't have the right word of corruption.
You join a club,
beyond just money.
You're joining. It's not easy. It's not easy to leave the club.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's-
You don't
yeah.
want to be
Right.
excluded.
Well, and it's
Yeah.
really hard too to go in there. And I do think many people might have gone in with the right reasons,
Sure.
the right motivations, and then they get corrupted by that club for whatever reason. Sometimes maybe it's blackmail. Sometimes it is just, oh, my life can be like this, and there's something to that. It happens in Hollywood too. So there's that too. Yeah, it's a lot more than the money. I agree with you, William.
Yeah, it's I think they do it in police work. If you're doing like narcotics and you end up like you're exposed to large volumes of narcotics and large amounts of cash, they figure that at some point in time you might be tempted. So they don't let you stay in that particular role too long. That's just human nature. I mean, everybody would think, most people would think, maybe most people wouldn't act, but there's some are going to act, and they think ultimately it's too tempting.
You know, this idea of money, maybe if you turned it onto maybe these shouldn't exist, I guess. But the SEC and FINRA, I think you just have to simply make the revolving door end. If you take a career here, you're going to be here through 20 years before you can, or 25, before you can sell your contacts and your access, and we're going to pay you more money. That's where I would do it, so that people are like the Department of State or other government jobs, FBI. You stay the whole time.
Right.
You don't spin out to this glorious castle called Goldman Sachs.
These regulators, especially in the financial industry, they need covenants not to compete. They should be signing employment contracts with, when you leave here for 5 years, you can't go work for the organizations that you were regulating. You just shouldn't be able to do it. I mean, it's standard stuff out in the private world. I mean, not everybody, but I mean, I've signed 2 different covenants not to compete. But to think that our regulators go there for 5 years, learn all the ins and outs of the organization, and then pop on over to Goldman Sachs and make 5 times the amount of money trying to figure out and avoid how to get caught on the very regulations and rules they were enforcing for 5 years. I mean, that's the reality.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm getting a lot of comments just to set the record straight. Little JR is not smoking heroin. Just to keep that straight. There are a bunch of people who are confused, so we just clarified that.
It's nicotine, people. Nicotine.
Okay,
I was wondering why this conversation was going off the rails.
There was a YouTube. I listened to a video, and now I'm forgetting who said it. I think it was the general that speaks on an event going on. Military event going on. He said there's 3 branches of our government: Northrop Grumman, the pharmaceutical industry, and BlackRock. It's stuck in my head.
Yeah.
I want to move on to XRP. Anybody have a take on the XRP decision? So that was a recent decision by the district court that found that, at least as to, I think, us investors, it wasn't deemed to be a security, and the SEC had no jurisdiction. And when it came to more sophisticated investors or accredited investors, there was an issue whether it might be construed to be a security as to that. Anybody have a take on that?
I really haven't spent a lot of time looking into that one right now. I have XRP as something I'm excited about to get into in the future, especially if GTI or Finger do what I'm hoping to. I'm looking at it as a long-term investment because I believe in it greatly because of its how it's going to be used with the BRICS nations. But as far as the case itself, I haven't spent much time learning on it right now.
I'd be surprised if there's not more to come. And I think on its face, it is a security. I mean, I don't know. It trades. It's either a security or a commodity. It's not a currency yet. Maybe it will be.
I'm sorry, JR?
All I can say is I'm sure they're going to appeal it. It's another one of those things that I'm not invested in. So aside from reading about it on, whatever financial website I happen to come across or seeing it on Twitter, that's about the extent of my background in it.
Yeah, and I think the critique of the decision ends up district court decision. It's not an appellate court decision. The critique was it wasn't definitive enough because it really didn't define what a security was, how it would, and it's got to be. I guess you have to be ultimately you have to be likelihood of you getting a profit, expectation of a profit, and they figured that us retailers we're too dumb, so we can't have any expectation of a profit in XRP, but the sophisticated and accredited hedge funds, they can. So that's how they made the distinction. Now, what I think what's kind of interesting is it was a little notch away from the SEC because it was limiting the SEC's jurisdiction. And William, you were kind of right. You were hinting at it that it might be kind of expanding because there's another case out there, SEC versus Coinbase. Which is in its early stages. And I guess the issue there is not all the cryptos that Coinbase sells, but 13 of them, the SEC deemed to be securities. I have no idea why it's 13, these 13 as opposed to any of the 13. They're early on in the case. They just had a conference, first conference before the judge. And the judge kind of suggested that, at least at this stage, that she's found some merit in the argument against these being securities. And one of the things that she focused on was that when
maybe their money.
Well, when Coinbase, that's possible too. But they said when Coinbase when IPO'd, the SEC said fine, didn't say that they were selling illegal securities. And if they had told Coinbase before they IPO'd, maybe Coinbase would have not IPO'd or taking different action. And the court was kind of suggesting that's not really fair to Coinbase. Not a final decision, but it relates to 13 different cryptos. And kind of along what you were saying, William, if we move from XRP to 13, whatever direction they go, whether they're deemed securities or not, it'll open up the market or close the market.
This is where, and I'll be quick, but this is where I think you have to look at it with what I consider, I hate the sound of my voice if that was me, but
I love the sound of your voice.
Really.
The SEC, in my judgment, is there, and FINRA is there to protect the banksters. DeFi and crypto is a threat to the banking model. You don't need fees on all layers. You won't need these high-priced investment bankers, overpaid wankers. You won't need, particularly maybe some of these high-priced asset managers. But also, it just levels the playing field so that anybody with $10 in Timbuktu can play. You don't have to have $1 million portfolio. I'll be short on that, but it is a threat to the existence of the massive amount of wealth and currency that these banks take for doing nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Just existing.
And the irony is, I think Gensler was accused of having a close relationship with SBF's family and had contacts, and who knows?
Just stalling for time so they can create their own coins and hedge funds and try to wrap it around so they can make fees on it.
Yeah,
exactly. And profit by it. Yep.
Yeah, because I guess they're just starting to permit certain kinds of ETFs, Bitcoin
So
ETF.
how does that, in your opinion, and JR and Ace, how does that stand? Gensler's out there saying we've got to regulate this to protect the public, where it's like a Monty Python sketch, Crunchy Frog. We've got to protect the public. You're not saying this frog. This Crunchy Frog has a real live frog in it? Well, yes. And with bones? Well, it wouldn't be crunchy then, would it? Constable, I can't say that, but the constable ate one of these. Anyway, the now I lost my point on that.
Listen, the frog was
Oh,
more
how
entertaining.
does it stand
Yeah.
that he's going after the crypto to protect, and he lets literally trillions of shares
Yeah.
not settle in the United States markets? How does he live with those two? I'm not a psychologist, but how does his brain work?
Yeah, I think they're
Well,
inconsistent, I would say. Fair statement.
Yeah. Yeah. What it's
All right.
yeah, go ahead, Richard.
Okay. So next one I want to talk about was, and I'll give you a little background. And the reason I bring this up is because it might be a solution to somebody with naked shorting issues. So JR and I started following this company called Sorrento Therapeutics, cancer oncology
What's
company.
the symbol?
Sorrento, S something.
Okay, all right, okay.
Looking at it right now.
And it has a subsidiary called Skylex, Scilex, but that may not be the way it's pronounced. And there was a dispute that came about. The therapeutics company got into a legal battle in arbitration. They won one side, lost the other side, but they lost more money than they won. So it created a liquidity problem. They got shorted to death, and they got naked shorted, we've determined, and that'll be the end part. But as a result of the liquidity crisis, and in order to establish, I guess, the naked shorting, they filed a Chapter 11 petition. Within the bankruptcy,
I like that. They moved from the prime broker to the prime broker. Is that part of it?
Yeah, because the brokers were involved in the bankruptcy, and they couldn't leave. They couldn't say you had to arbitrate it. They were stuck. So during the bankruptcy, the judge made the brokers disclose the amount of shares they had.
Wow.
And compared that total to the amount of shares that should have been. And upon submission, and they didn't do it right away.
Sorry, so it's every broker dealer, or just the ones in the case?
It was just the ones. It was the ones in the case. They were the named defendants. There was 7 of them. Okay. Now, right. Richard and I haven't done any digging into why those 7 broker dealers were sued, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. So the court ordered them to disclose it. They disclosed it. There was a position that shouldn't have existed. The court then ordered them to disclose how much money they had made in lending out the shares and their profit.
Wow.
At that point in time, the brokers got busy, started filing a bunch of stuff, and started negotiating. Well, this is now we're kind of interpreting, but started negotiating with the debtor, which is the company, and with the biggest shareholders of that company. And they continued. There was a temporary restraining order, so they couldn't short it anymore. They couldn't do anything negative.
I'm sure they followed that rule.
Yeah, I know. By the way, this happens to be in Texas. This happens to be in the Texas bankruptcy court.
Wow.
So they blocked it. Eventually, the TRO, the temporary restraining order, was extended, and then they worked out a deal, supposedly, amongst the brokers. No, not involving the brokers. Brokers excluded, with the naked short sellers who were anonymous. So in the bankruptcy, they're not disclosed their names, but the debtor, the company, and the equity committee, the guys who had interest in the company, worked out a deal with the naked shorts. The deal was, you have to cover. You cover by buying shares or buying it from the company. The price is determined by a representative of the company and somebody from the court, but nobody from the naked short sellers. So that the likelihood is the price would be fairer.
Well, I've done videos on it. I haven't done it recently, but that was my glaringly obvious solution to MMTLP
That's
way
awesome.
back when.
Right.
And
I'm not
and
saying this, by the way.
I've never moved off my solution. It parallels that.
Yeah, just so it's not a coincidence, I didn't bring that up just kind of out of the blue. I threw it out because I'm going to kind of speculate on kind of ways it might work. So there's a motion filed. There seems to have been negotiations. There seems that there will be some resolution with the naked shorts being covered and with the brokers still being liable, which to me is like, okay, let's do it.
This stock's still trading?
So the dividend is still trading. Well, they're both still trading. The one's in bankruptcy and on OTC right now, and I think Sorrento's, I want to say 23 cents a share.
I'd see SRNEQ. It looks like 35 cents a share, but
yeah, Silax is still trading now. Silax, you know, let's not go down the path of trading because we're focused on that legal aspect because
absolutely.
It's hard to tell what happened in Silex, to be honest with you, because it spiked at one point. It went from $3 up to $9, and then it's teetering now. I want to say maybe 6, 7. I've been watching it because it seems to ebb and flow with every type of filing that gets made in this case. I will tell you this. Richard and I have talked about this particular case at length. If you're not familiar with it, do some research into it because we see this as one of the crack is starting to form in all of this. You've got a bankruptcy judge that found no two ways about it. The float was double and triple sold, according to this bankruptcy judge, based on the numbers that the prime brokers turned over. Now, the order that Richard is referring to just came down here this week. It's not been signed by the judge, but they've got one of two ways to get out of it. And William, you talked about that solution very early on. The Sorrento is going to offer the number of shares based on the price that they determine, or they can go into the open market and buy them. Now, here's the kicker, and this is why Richard and I are convinced that a couple of these brokers have been negotiating with the equity committee and the debtors because the entire program, or whatever we want to call it, the entire solution is voluntary. They don't have to go in. They don't have to do that. It's a voluntary program to get them off the hook, because if they do go through that program, they become waived of all future and potential liability from Sorrento.
Exactly.
So,
so they're in the clear.
The sign-offs.
They're in the clear.
It's the releases.
But the interesting part is the federal judges. So bankruptcy court judges are federal judges, but they're different kind of judges than district court judges. District court judges,
the estate.
Well, district court judges, federal judges are Article 3 judges there for life. Bankruptcy judges are appointed. They're not there for life. They're there for term. They don't have the same authority. But it's interesting that the federal judges, the district court judges, aren't the ones that are ordering basically the disclosure of the naked shorts. And in this particular case, the judge specifically used the term naked shorts. It wasn't like we're not construing it, but she said it.
But Richard, do you think, and here's an interesting question we can go off on. Do you think that's a result of the fact that it is a bankruptcy court and not a district court? And what we know about these cases, when they go before district courts, they never really get to discovery because they're settled confidentially and basically removed from district court, where this particular case is a little different because the process and procedure in bankruptcy is much different than a normal federal district court.
Yeah, because either you're doing a reorganization or you're maximizing the assets and paying off the creditors, one or the other. You're not looking to necessarily impose liability or those kind of issues. And the judge has complete jurisdiction over all the assets. So what I was thinking, I didn't know which company, I'll throw out a company. I really wasn't thinking about that. But let's say GTii. They don't know who owns their shares, the correct ownership. I, as a shareholder, don't know it. And, and let me caveat that first. So we have different kinds of bankruptcies. You have a Chapter 7 where you're basically out the door, business done. Then you have a Chapter 11, which is a reorganization. It could be just, and I'm going to use this term, it could just be a placeholder in essence. You could go into it, it freezes everything. And if you want to prove something, you have the ability to ask the judge to let you prove it up. So if you were able to make a case that we're being naked shorted, but we don't have the ability to prove that up. So judge, can you make the prime brokers and GTii come clean and tell us how many naked shorts are there? Mm-hmm. And the judge, based on this case, would theoretically have the ability to make that order. And listen, that's a pretty powerful thing if that starts to be the tradition. The reason I threw out MMTLP, I threw out an MMTLP out of interest, and I understand the difficulties. I'm not suggesting it, so nobody jump off a building at this point in time. It's more of a strategic thought. But MMTLP and NextBridge are in Texas, and this bankruptcy judge is in Texas. So it might be like, this might be a very friendly jurisdiction for those type of requests. And it's not like in a bankruptcy, you have to complete it. So if I had $1, if I had $1 in GTii and they went through in a chapter 11, that doesn't mean I have anything less than $1. It doesn't impact me in any way. But it might be a means or a potential means of maybe getting relief. And it might be somebody also, just thinking out loud, maybe I transfer some shares to an LLC and the LLC files a bankruptcy, again, to determine what their interest is. Because all of us are shareholders, right? And we don't really know what our one share of GTI, Finger, MMTLP, we really don't know what that represents. Any input?
No, I'm just thinking, I was going to ask you guys this, but I think you just answered it. Can bankruptcy court be used as precedent for district court cases?
Yeah, you could cite it. Yeah. It's not binding. It's not binding, but it's certainly citable.
Okay.
Well, here's the other thing that could happen. Think about the premise of short selling is to short sell it and drive the company into bankruptcy. But now you've got a bankruptcy judge that looked at the issue. And one of Sorrento's arguments was, part of the reason why we're in bankruptcy is because you naked shorted our largest asset, and we lost value in the company. Mm. And so if you've got a court decision where the judge took a look at what happened with the shares of stock, remember why these companies are issuing stock to begin with. It's to raise capital. So if the premise of a short sale is to drive the company in bankruptcy, now the company can go into bankruptcy and potentially make an argument, I shouldn't be here because the short sales are what drove us here because they squeezed us out of legitimate capital. Mm-hmm. So that's how I see it potentially unfolding.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's new, and it's another means maybe of figuring out, because obviously it's been a bear for all of us to figure out the short volume. Everybody can speculate about it.
I think there's just 2 points. There's so many things going through my head, but I'll focus on 2. One is I can understand why FINRA is reluctant to hand out the blue sheets, because if you've got, in the case of MMTLP, you've got 105 broker dealers, you got 3 or 5 or 6 of them that are going to be financially extinct if that information gets out.
Yeah.
So you need to do it on a global number rather than a specific one. Merrill Lynch doesn't want Ken at Citadel to know that their whole franchise might go, I'm making it up, might go underwater because they, at the DTC, there's 5 million shares, but their accounts have 250 million. So that I can see that one aspect. The other thing I want to point out in the case of MMTLP, in the Sorrento, they're leaving the valuation to somebody else. The one good thing about MMTLP, the valuation is there. It's in the ground. So it's a risky game they're playing because that value's going up, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I agree with you, by the way, about the blue sheets. And I asked for them, by the way. So, I sued I sued Fidelity and whoever. I
That's
asked
great.
for them.
I love
They
it.
ignored me. I'm still ongoing, but I asked for the information contained within the blue sheets. So all I wanted was a share count. I wanted the share count. So I understand also why they don't want to give up the blue sheets. If I'm FINRA and I'm thinking FINRA side, I don't want to set a precedence. I don't want to like give it to anybody, because now if I give it to you, everybody's going to get asked for them, and they're going maybe some situations will be justifiable and they'll have to do it. So I don't think they'll do it for that would be their first reason. But the fact about giving share counts, that doesn't make any sense. There's no private information, no confidential information.
Yeah,
It's just
exactly.
numbers.
Yeah.
So just going off that, guys, this is a little different tangent. But I wanted to ask William. William, do you think that blockchain technology could help solve some of this down the road if it's ever implemented?
Well, I think what the wankers are doing is trying to use monetary theory, modern, about 400 years worth, 500 years worth of fractional reserve banking theory. They're trying to apply that to the securities. That's my opinion. I haven't read that anywhere. But the way to expand assets under management, money in a bank is 10 to 1. Let's do 10 to 1. And then it's gotten bigger. So I think there's going to be a huge attempt not to allow blockchain to make one share equal to one share. They are loving one share being 30 shares because they're making the commissions, the fees, assets under management. It's the whole thing. And then, of course, they're not paying taxes. But yes, I think, Ace, that the current system, unless it's fixed soon, it's totally. I did a drawing and I can't do it again, but quickly. But this is an upside down pyramid. It's all of this is being created on Mrs. O'Leary's account, and it's all doing all this, but her account, the real account, only has 1,000 shares of Exxon, and everybody's doing all this. Well, and when the money is easy and loose, it works. But live by the sword, die by the sword. Margin is fun on the way up. It sucks on the leverage, sucks on the way down. Our system could implode. And yes, Ace, I think the answer will be, because no one's going to trust the system afterward. I would love to set up an honest, vanilla brokerage firm, but they don't exist anymore.
Yeah. Guys,
would you have rather I said yes instead of a long answer?
No, that was wonderful. I just want to let you guys know I have about 7 minutes left.
Okay.
But I just wanted to say, touching on what William just said, and also listening to you guys, learning about that bankruptcy case, I find that really fascinating. And to me, it kind of validates something that I think is happening, which is that this is spreading. I mean, more and more people every day are waking up to the issues in the market, and the market is completely run on trust. It's completely run on trust. If that trust is gone, so there will be a tipping point when it reaches too many people. And I just don't, like William's saying, I think the cracks are in the foundation, and it's really starting to rot really bad. And so it's only a matter of time, for me, in my opinion, until we either get a completely new system or there's major reform that has to happen. And I just don't know if the people will accept anything that's not transparent and invest their money again. I don't know how long it's going to take. It could be a year, 5 years, 10 years. But I feel like we're at that verge. I think one of the reasons everything seems so crazy right now is because everything is kind of being investigated in new ways by the people, and that just never ever, I don't think this ever can ever cross their minds would be possible. It's like, that's why the movie Dumb Money, that's what they called us, and they're learning we're not. And so it's changing everything. But anyways, that's just some of the thoughts I'm having as I'm reading this. It just, or hearing you guys, it just really validates, because if those cases start coming too, that's going to lead to a spiral. You know, one win starts another win. It's the first one's always the hardest.
The
Yeah,
fax
JR and
machine-
I,
oh,
yeah,
sorry.
JR, I'm sorry. Go ahead, William.
I was just going to say the fax machine brought down the Soviet Union. It's argued, and maybe this social media and the way it will bring down.
I thought I was listening to the Beatles. I don't know.
You know,
No,
Back
JR,
in the USSR.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
JR
Richard.
and I have talked about MMTLP for quite some time, and you know, and there's all kinds of things going on. To anybody who's an MMTLP person out there, there's all kinds of things going on in the background, and I'm sure you've heard that, but there actually is. But we believed, and I still believe, as I believed on day one, so day 219, whatever it is, I believe that in the end we'd prevail.
Yeah.
But I always believed we never would know when that would be. That time was the issue. And listen, obviously patience is a huge issue in this, in trading, in holding, in investing. And people sometimes have misapprehensions as to time. And unfortunately, most of this stuff runs on legal time. And legal time is incredibly slow.
Right.
And I'm sure it's frustrating for everybody out there. But, you know, I think I'm speaking for JR, but he can speak for himself. I think, you know, in the end, that all these stocks are going to prevail. And I agree. Just one. That's all. One will turn it for them all.
Well, Finger is going to help. GTii is going to help
100%.
MMTLP simply by making that journalist at that magazine, Forbes, his point is going to be totally wrong. Ace, why don't you just talk for the next 5 minutes before you go?
I mean, I think that was kind of my ending rant, but I'm not as good at this as you are, William, with the timing. You know, I think I'm so impressed by how long you go, and just like everybody else, I listen to you all the time.
Yeah, we are too.
I love it.
I'm trying to forget what happened in
Richard and I are just like, all right, we're done. Click.
It calms me down. But yeah, I guess what I'll finish on is this, is just touching off what you just said. I am so impressed with these communities of shareholders getting together on Twitter, YouTube, whatever it is. It's amazing to me, because for one thing, like going back to my AMC days, it almost felt competitive. I never felt that way, but there was like this dumb competition thing, like, why would you hold GameStop or this, or we're diamond hands. This is all, like, it was so stupid. And I know that's probably just a small, loud percentage of them, but it was loud. And over here, it's the exact opposite. And I think, you know, Finger runs this week or next week or soon, which it looks is very possible. I do think that rolls to GTI. Well, if those start gaining momentum and these blow up and the attention comes on them, well, that's going to help MMTLP, because all these shareholders over here are talking about MMTLP. We all know about it. And that just puts more pressure on judges and lawyers, everybody involved, because, you know, we're all supposed to be impartial and not swayed by public opinion, but that's BS. We all are, even at the highest levels. And so it's impressive to me how this is coming together. And as a student of history, this really is the kind of thing that once it starts, it has to see it to fruition. It can't be stopped at this point. There's just too many people, too involved, too much coming together. And it's like in you know, leading up to the Revolutionary War, it's like they met in bars and taverns and they were all talking to each other. Well, that's what we're doing on Twitter and YouTube. We're all talking to each other. It's just spreading like wildfire. And I'm amazed every day. I see more and more people reaching out to me, asking me questions. Hey, I just heard about this. I stumbled across a William video. I saw an Ace video. I saw a Not Legal video. It's just like, it's amazing to me just how people are just finding us. And once they're in, because there's already that seed of doubt built into them because of whatever it's been in the last 10 years, but COVID, whatever. But that seed of doubt, like, things don't feel right. And so now they hear something else and they go looking for it. And anyways, it's just this whole wave that's happening. And for me, it's really exciting because I do feel like I feel very confident that something's happening with Finger soon. And I think that's going to cause a tidal wave. I really do. And so my hope is that after I've only been doing this since January, talking online, but before that, holding all this time. But for me, it's almost like I actually feel some relief that, oh my God, I think the momentum is finally building up to a tipping point, and that just feels wonderful. So that's what I'll end on.
Well, thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Ace, couple comments.
Yeah.
Because Richard and I have talked about this privately and on our YouTube channel.
Mm.
We are grassroots right now. We are at the very cusp of change, and it's the four of us. It's everybody in the spaces. It's all the other people that are out there talking about this.
Yeah.
And the fact that us four have come together from, I mean, I didn't know who you were until 2 weeks ago. You know, William, I didn't know who he was until September of last year. You know, here are four normal people, four everyday people going about living their lives. And all of a sudden, here we are in the middle of this firestorm.
Yeah.
And you know, 15, 20 years from now, we're going to look back on moments like this and think, my gosh, look at all the change we've accomplished.
Absolutely.
And you're right. We are at a tipping point. I'm going to let you go. I got one more comment. I just want to say kudos to you, because someone put in the comments that this space should be called Ace and the Old Guys. And that's what I was talking about when you were talking.
So
that's hilarious.
Ace, on one of my calls, they were complimenting you, and I said you're unflappable. I wish I could be. I'm flappable sometimes. But you made great comments, and I would just add to, and I can't do it with your grace, Ace. But when I started, I used, and I am not a preacher at all. I'm not. But I started with, to myself, a little prayer to make sure that I left my ego out of it, and I was trying to help this cause. And I think that the man upstairs has been helping us a lot. And I'm not trying to be Bible thumping at all.
No, I believe in, I tell my viewers all the time, I don't care what you believe in, if you're not religious, if you are, if you believe just the universe, whatever, but just like, let's take a meditative moment and just, you know, just whether it's to focus or to say a prayer or whatever, it's just helping. And I agree.
Fighting for a true thing. Yeah. Anyway, I cut.
No, that's fine. I was going to say, I thought this is a good place to kind of end it. Okay. Maybe we could do this again and kind of, I have a bunch more questions, but you know, that was a nice ending, and I really appreciate both of you joining us. And I can't say how much I value both of you and your participation in the community. And I think probably Ace is going to do a live stream right now. No, but I really do, and I'm so glad you both joined us. And again, invitation's open anytime to come back. And JR, do you have anything to add?
And just one thing. And when Richard wants you guys to come back, I'll reach out to you, okay, and schedule it.
Well, thank you.
This was an honor. Thank you, guys.
And if anyone's watching, I just want to give a little bit of hope. You don't have to wait for all the legal stuff. Money talks on Wall Street. And when these bastards start losing money, all of a sudden we start winning. And the money.
Yeah. All right, guys, I gotta go. I hear a little one crying. So let's do that.
Thank you.
It was an honor. Thank you so much.
Good night, everybody.
Take care, everybody.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right.